So I'm Leah Lockhart, and I'm sort of low-key community manager for Urban Tide. And what that means is I try to build an online sort of tribe and community around Urban Tide, and I'll explain what Urban Tide does in a minute. I'll just carry on. So what I want to talk about tonight is engagement and how we can engage more people in communities, citizens, businesses, politicians, policymakers in this open data agenda and the work that goes on around open data projects, and then by extension, smart cities, and by further extension, Internet of Things. So how can we involve people and foster understanding around all this work that we try to do with technology? So this is me. I have a long history in government and local government, digital projects and digital communication. I started off at Edinburgh Council and then latterly was with Scottish Government, and until December was in Scottish Government's digital engagement team. And that's a sort of experimental team working with policymakers to encourage them to use the internet and social media to connect with citizens and stakeholders in better ways so that more people can inform policy and make it more sort of democratically legitimate. I am technologist and academic adjacent. I am neither of those things, but I work with academics and with technologists. And my main goal in everything I do, in voluntary work and paid work, is to bridge disciplines and people. So how do we connect communities with scientists, academics, and people working in technology so that we're all collaborating and creating things together? And Urban Tide is a small startup based at Codebase. And they're in the business of open data and smart cities. So smart city consultations mainly at the moment, helping cities sort of figure out where they are and the smart maturity model. We also deliver open data training to all public services on behalf of Scottish Government. And we're about 6 months into that 12-month program. If you visit our blog, you can get a kind of 6-month update to see where we are and what the feedback's been, and hopefully where we'll go after the program's done, because there's more to do after working with people to get the basics about open data out there and in the organizations. There's a lot more to do after that. And we're also building an open data platform called USmart. If anybody here wants to know anything about that, I'm going to see the prototype for the first time Thursday. So we're going to start communicating about that more and more from this week, hopefully. Okay. So I want to put out some provocations. I also want to ask a lot of questions, none of which I have answers to. And then I want to know if you'd like to collaborate to find answers to questions that I will ask. I want to go over some case studies. So how sort of typical engagement is happening at the moment around open data in mainly government projects. But I don't think they're atypical in private sector either. So a provocation is that we have responsibilities to foster understanding in non-technical communities in the development of open, smart, and IoT agendas. And that current engagement practices are really just producing really pretty artifacts. They're tick box exercises, window dressings, and good news stories. So how can we go beyond that and move to open data 2.0? How can we move forward on a journey of engagement that's more meaningful, more impactful, and will help us create things that are useful and usable? I want to put forward the idea of creating a 5-star engagement system, not unlike 5-star open data. And think about how do we make engagement core business to the work that we do? And why does this matter? when you're thinking about working with data, open data, and communicating to people why that's important, and again, by extension, smart cities and IoT, how can we create things and work with people in ways that are legitimate and democratically legitimate, and that fosters trust, understanding, and involvement, which in turn fosters discovery, serendipity. And even if you are sort of financially, commercially motivated, and maybe the civic partnership is not your whole agenda, it's still good business to work with people, to co-create and to collaborate, because you know you're going toward creating something that's useful and usable. So I'm going to put forward some case studies and talk about things that are happening now, sort of typical engagement practices, but thinking about it as a journey. So what's happening now isn't bad or terrible or useless. I think it's just a starting point, and I'd like to talk about how we can further develop that and get to a place where there's something like maybe a 5-star framework. So in my field of work, when talking to people about engagement and civic engagement, there's some rather unfortunate things that come to mind. This is a recent example. Bodie McBoatface. When I was working in government and local government, a lot of the pushback I would get about civic engagement, citizen engagement, was we won't be able to handle the feedback, or we're going to get all the crazies coming forward, or ideas that we can't implement or really do anything about. One answer to that question, or to a way to counter that concern, is that deeper engagement with people, so not asking superficial questions or doing a tick box exercise, will likely get you into a more involved and mature conversation with people that is meaningful and gets information back to you that was useful in product and service development. So just like Mr. James Wilson said here at the sort of inquiry in Parliament, if you ask a superficial, low-stake question, you'll get a trivial answer, and you may get more interesting response from deeper engagement. So the engagement exercise itself, if it's built in its core business, is likely to have a more impactful way about it that will bring you back more meaningful information to your work. So I just want to quickly talk about Future City Glasgow's future mapping project. It was a huge piece of work, community mapping, and they were using analog and digital maps going into communities. Such a wonderful piece of engagement that created a wonderful, beautiful report. But it was temporary. It was treated as projects, sort of hanging off the side of the Future Cities project. You can see here the numbers, the engagement, the resource that went into this was immense. It was incredible. And they did help people in communities understand the power of mapping, how to use digital maps, how to use OpenStreetMap, and then handed over tools that they could take forward and carry on the work themselves, which is probably not happening. So one of their own recommendations, sorry, this is what not to do on PowerPoint, but it's a good quote. One of their own recommendations is that this type of activity and this community mapping and enabling people to understand and assisting them to do the work is necessary as a long-term thing. Again, it should be core business for it to continue. At some point, people will take that from communities and continue on. But to drop in, do something temporarily and come out again is nice, it's useful to a point. But if it's not core business, it'll probably die away. When I was working in Scottish Government, we implemented something called Dialogue, and it's an ideation platform. So it's a place where people can submit ideas around certain pieces of policy, either being redesigned or something that's being created. Citizens can register to the platform. They can then submit ideas, other people can come in, they can vote, they can comment. And the hope is that then there's a conversation inside the platform that goes back into the business of government and informs the way policy is created and molded and shaped. This is one example of some digital engagement that I was asked to help with regard to Agenda for Cities. It was a dialogue that was set up by a woman who was asked to do something digital engagement. So she came to us. We set up this dialogue that for a month and a half sat with no outreach, no engagement, and no work to bring people to this thing. It was seen as being published online was it. That was good enough. It was visible, and if you build it, they will come, which didn't exactly happen. So this arguably quite important discussion point, Agenda for Cities, had 18 contributions in just over a month and a half of being open to the public. People in my own circles who are very interested in this had no idea it even existed. So it was step one, put online. Step two didn't happen, which was the outreach and engagement. So again, I think it's a journey. We're kind of getting there at the moment. We're doing things like going into communities and helping them map. We're doing things like putting stuff online, but we're not doing the extra bit that's actually encouraging people to come and co-create and collaborate. And that's not to throw shade at Scottish Government. This is sort of typical that the engagement piece is extra. It's seen as something you do if you have time, or it's done at the last minute. So how can we level up? How can we go a bit beyond just putting something online or temporarily engaging with citizens and communities? And I want to put forward two examples that I think are doing really, really good work and are taking this engagement piece a bit further, in that they're bringing ongoing engagement into the core business of what they do. Interestingly, they're both supported by housing associations, and none of them are in Scotland. So the first one is the Trafford Innovation and Intelligence Lab. They do a lot of things with data to solve problems in the community around Trafford. They're working out loud, they're working in the open. If you visit their website, you can see what they're doing with data that is really impacting people's lives in the community. So as an example, the cervical screening in their area was falling through the floor. They did some beautiful things with data. They now have the most improved cervical screening going on in their area, and it was about using data to identify where the gaps were in take-up. Some of the issues were around language, and then some of the issues were around outreach. So they took the data and then did something in communities to engage people for cervical screening. Thanks, Alan. And that work is ongoing. So it's not project-based, it's something that's core business to Trafford. And the other one is Bromford Lab, again, a housing association. Bromford is doing stuff in their innovation lab that is really less about the wider community and more about what can they do to improve the services they provide through the housing association. So they take something that's really gnarly and ugly and sticky for them as a problem or an issue they need to tackle. They give it a set amount of time to find a solution, and if they don't, they drop it and they move on. They also work out loud. So you can see them all collaborating on Trello, for example. You can see their thought process and where they're going. And they publish everything that they do for everyone else to learn from. So again, it's core business. This lab is part of the Housing Association, and it's using collaboration, innovative ways of working, and data as well to solve problems. So if this is a journey and we're all kind of getting there and doing things to involve people continuously, what is a destination? So I hope everyone's familiar with the 5-star open data 5-star deployment scheme. I want to introduce the idea that we could do something similar for engagement with regard to open data. A gentleman at Ghent University has come up with a similar idea for open data portals. So he's created sort of criteria at which you'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5-star. So could we do the same for engagement? What kind of 5-star, what does 5-star engagement look like? What does 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5-star engagement look like? Can we create a suite of things that mean people can sort of measure where they're at when they're doing open data work, not just regard to opening the data, but everything around it as well? So that's blank, because I don't know what this might look like, or even if it's a good idea. So this is why I was putting it out to everyone here, and I have been speaking to other people about this. I have a friend who is working out of University of West of Scotland, who's an ethnographer. She works in community digital media, so she's quite interested in getting involved in creating something around this. So this is really a shout out to feeding back whether it's a crap idea, and if you think it's a goer, do you want to help think about what this 5-star engagement might look like? And that's ways that you can get in touch.